All great anime have many good episodes, but beyond that, there are specific ones that blow your mind, with incredible twists, turns, payoffs, and setups that are all executed to near perfection. And even beyond those is Madoka Magica Episode 10. This is the greatest single episode of any anime I've ever seen, and I'm going to dive into why it's responsible for making Madoka Magica into the masterpiece that it is. When I think of the single best episodes of all time, I don't think of episodes like the finale of Code Geass. Despite having one of the best endings in all of fiction, the last episode is only good because of everything setting it up. While Madoka Magica Episode 10 builds on everything that came before, it, in and of itself, is a phenomenal story that captures a massive amount of time, reveals an incredible twist, pays off what we have learned about the characters, while also building for the next 2 episodes to have incredible payoffs. At this point in the story, we know what Kyubey is up to. Magical girls, who have a wish granted and are given powers to fight witches, eventually run out of grief seeds to purify themselves, exploding into a witch. This releases a massive amount of energy, which the little alien creature harvests for the rest of life in the cosmos. But what builds up to Episode 10 the most is what we learn about Homura. She had already known the fate of the magical girls. She was very detached from their deaths, and she was extremely protective of Madoka. But the most important reveal is that she has time magic, which was hinted at in really awesome, subtle ways leading up to it. However, knowing what had been happening whenever we saw her fight, we still only saw her stop time. There was no evidence of her having any control of time beyond that. Episode 10 of Madoka Magica is simply the backstory of Akemi Homura, and it is a fascinating, emotional, and brutal story. We had always seen Homura as a cold and calculating character, but in the first scene of this episode, we see a normal, shy middle school girl entering a new class with no friends. It quickly becomes clear that this is not the reality we have watched for 9 episodes, as Madoka is a magical girl and Mami is still alive. Then we see the events play out very quickly, with Madoka and Homura becoming close friends in a very similar way to Madoka and Sayaka. Homura was heavily involved in their lives, but not yet a magical girl. Eventually, the Great Witch, Walpurgisnacht, descended onto the world, killing Mami and Madoka through their battle. This leads to the most important moment of the whole series. Homura decides to become a magical girl, wishing to be able to redo her meeting with Madoka to save her from this fate. The wording of her wish is very important, and leads to the first thing that a greatest anime episode of all time needs, which is the basic storytelling principle of things need to make sense. This setup for the rest of the episode, and chronologically the entire anime, is so well done. In a way, the entire anime works or ends up being kinda dumb, depending on this specific moment. Homura's wish gives a great reason for the story to happen, while creating one of the most interesting twists in anime. At this point, it seems we've been following the wrong character. Part of the twist is that Homura, the distant, edgy, mysterious girl, was really the star of the show the whole time. It's like watching Steins Gate, but following Mayuri instead of Okabe. However, this is not entirely true, and I'll get into that later in this video. But back to the wish itself, Homura is given time magic, but it's not a complete control over time. Except for after Walpurgisnacht descends upon the world, she can only ever stop time. This is because her power is directly linked to her wish to save Madoka. This removes all the logical problems present with a time machine. Why doesn't she just go back a few moments whenever something goes wrong? Because this is magic, and that isn't how this works. She only gets to go back a month, at the end of the month, to prevent what has happened. This perfectly paid off the subtle setup that we have been getting up to this point, with everything we had learned about wishes and magical girls, while also being a fascinating concept in its own right. It also set up the finale by giving us the new question: why have we been watching this specific timeline? After this excellent reveal, we get several snippets of the most important moments of the show, although on different timelines, as Homura goes back again and again and again to fix things. We see Homura learning to fight while preparing for Walpurgisnacht, but in the end, it's always the same. Madoka dies in the final battle. Through all of this, Homura learns how magical girls are tricked by Kyubey to turn into witches, and all the other things she knew that she seemingly shouldn't have known initially. But the character moments are what really stick out. With what we already know of the characters from spending 9 episodes with them, we don't need time to understand or care about them. So quickly giving us the best moments of each timeline works so perfectly to show us Homura's experiences. We know the kind of person Mami is, so it's shocking to see her kill Kyoko after learning the fate of magical girls. But it's also understandable, since she has always fought so hard against witches. Sayaka's deaths and stubborn attitude is also true to her character. In the end, all the terrible things that the magical girls do is more tragic than anything. It's sending middle school girls to war with no direction and expecting them to think rationally. They should never have to be in this situation to begin with. But through all of these horrible events that replay over and over again, with foolish mistakes made by everybody, Madoka is the only one who never betrays Homura or anyone else. In fact, she never does anything wrong, but shows that she truly cares about others more than herself every single time. This is such an important part of this episode that could be easily looked over. With the time travel aspect and the story being built around Homura's actions, it feels as if she is the secret main character and Madoka might get sidelined in her own series. But this aspect keeps the story going in the same direction. Despite the twist, it does not lose its focus. Madoka is still the main character, even in episode 10. Every time Homura traveled back in time to change fate was because of the person Madoka was. She inspired Homura to figure out how to fix it, but in the end, she never could and must rely on Madoka again to save her. However, the events of this episode are not in vain, as we look to how brilliantly it sets up the ending. With the constant time travel magic being centered around Madoka, it creates threads that give her more potential and power as a magical girl. At least that is Kyubey's theory on it. This means every attempt to prevent Madoka from becoming a magical girl to save her from her fate only reinforces her fate as being the only one powerful enough to save the world. All of this happens to Madoka only because that's how the world works, and that she was a good, kind, caring person. This is such a wonderfully brutal concept. The difficult situation Madoka is put in isn't anyone's fault. It wasn't due to some dumb misunderstanding or the result of an evil person's desires. Even Kyubey is a totally neutral force in this situation because of how the alien species views humanity. This all sets up the ending where Madoka selflessly makes a wish to change the way the world works. She takes responsibility for what she can do, despite none of this being her fault. So even with this backstory making Homura a fully fleshed out, incredibly strong, sympathetic, and fascinating character, it still all comes back around to Madoka being the hero. Among the brilliant ways it sets up the finale and pays off everything being set up to this are some of the most emotional, hard-hitting moments in the series. Despite not experiencing these timelines, every highlight works so well. I've never seen a story do this before. It feels like watching an entire series in one episode. Homura shooting Madoka's soul gem is one of the most powerful moments in anime, and despite it being reversed because of time travel, it's still an incredibly meaningful moment because Homura actually experienced this. And that's just one example. For all those reasons, along with simply being extremely entertaining, episode 10 of Madoka Magica is easily one of the best, if not the best anime episode of all time. It's vital for the plot, it has the best reveals, and some of the most emotional moments of the series. It's way more than just an interesting twist and being the beginning of the end. It's a dive into an incredibly tragic story about love and emotions, explored through a cruel world. And it's perfect. Thanks for watching. Check out this video I made going over every episode of a pretty crazy sci-fi anime. It took me months to make, so it should be pretty good. It's right here on the top card. That's all for me. Ciao, meow.